I stood in the back of the ballroom, while Peter Thornton praised my work for exactly 40 seconds before erasing me in the next breath. The grand ballroom of the Carlton Hotel was filled with the elite of the logistics industry. The smell of expensive cologne, fine wine, and success hung heavy in the air. I had spent the last 14 months working 18-hour days, neglecting my health and my personal life, all to ensure that this very night would be a celebration of triumph rather than a funeral for a bankrupt company. Harvey Miller has done exceptional technical work this past year, Peter said, his champagne glass raised toward the crystal chandeliers. But as we move into our next phase, Apex Logistics Group needs visionary leadership. So, effective immediately, my son Jeffrey will be assuming Harvey's responsibilities as Chief Operations Officer. The applause was mechanical, polite. A few people glanced my way, then quickly found something else to look at, like acknowledging what just happened might make them complicit. Jeffrey stood beside his father in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, nodding with practiced humility, as if he had earned this moment through anything other than biology. I remained near the service entrance with the people who actually knew how this company functioned. The logistics team, senior analysts, client coordinators who remembered every account detail without needing to check their notes. Behind Peter, the projector displayed a slide I had designed myself. From revenue crisis to record growth, the apex turnaround. My systems, my process maps, my 18-hour days. My name was nowhere on that slide. Peter continued his speech with the smooth confidence of someone who had never had to prove himself. Success does not come from one individual working in isolation. It comes from a unified vision executed by people who understand where this company needs to go. Jeffrey represents that future. Jeffrey shook his father's hand. Photographers captured the moment. The applause grew louder because that is what people do when power changes hands in public, regardless of whether it makes sense. By the time the crowd started drifting toward the open bar, I had already made my decision. I walked directly to Peter's office while everyone else celebrated. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was headed. Their attention remained fixed on Jeffrey, on the stage, on the carefully curated story they had just been sold. Peter was alone when I entered, jacket draped over his chair, tie loosened, leaning back like a general who had just won a difficult campaign. "Harvey," he said with something close to warmth. "What did you think of the announcement?" I closed the door. The click echoed in the sudden quiet. "You told me results mattered here," I said. "You have seen the numbers. You know exactly who rebuilt this company." He studied me for a moment, then smiled, not apologetically, not even uncomfortably, just enough to make his position clear. "I know precisely what you accomplished," he replied. "You handled the operational side. Very competently, I should add. But leadership requires something different: vision, presence, the ability to inspire confidence in rooms where technical details do not matter. You promised that if I turned this place around, my position would be secure." "And it is," he said smoothly. "We will take care of your needs. We are not ungrateful." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out his wallet, and thumbed through several bills before selecting one. He slid it across the polished wood toward me without standing. A single $100 note. "This," he said, tapping it once with his index finger, "represents what your contribution is actually worth to this organization. Take it. Be grateful we are acknowledging you at all." For several seconds, the only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning and muted laughter from the party downstairs. I looked at the bill, crisp, clean, worth less than the parking fees I had accumulated working weekends to save his company from bankruptcy. I looked at him again. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing anger. I picked up the 100 slowly, folded it once, and placed it in my pocket. "Thank you," I said quietly. He looked almost disappointed. That was it. No dramatics, no confrontation, no emotional scene for the remaining staff to discuss. He thought that meant he had won, that I had accepted his assessment of my worth and would disappear quietly into the background. What he did not understand was that I had not left empty-handed. What he did not realize was that overnight Apex Logistics Group would shift from owning my operational framework to desperately needing it, and access had just been revoked. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. If you enjoy stories where competent professionals get dismissed by arrogant executives, where nepotism meets reality, and where one insulting $100 bill becomes the most expensive mistake a chief executive officer ever made, you are going to want to hear exactly what happened. You are going to want to hear exactly what happened the next morning, when they arrived at work and discovered that replaceable was not quite the word they thought it was. My name is Harvey Miller. I am 54 years old, and until 3 days ago, I was the person you called at Apex Logistics Group when something critical needed fixing immediately. Apex Logistics Group started as a mid-sized supply chain consulting firm. Then it expanded too aggressively, chased contracts it could not properly service, and woke up one fiscal year to discover it was functionally insolvent. Revenue was hemorrhaging, clients were threatening legal action, and internal processes were held together with outdated software and manual workarounds that no one had documented properly. When I arrived 14 months ago, Apex Logistics Group was not just struggling, it was collapsing in slow motion. Time, credibility, and client trust were all depleted. The only reason some contracts remained active was because terminating them would have been more expensive than enduring the dysfunction. I did not get a corner office when I joined. I got a cubicle near the freight elevator and a directive from Peter Thornton that sounded straightforward, but was essentially impossible. "Stop the crisis," Peter said during our first meeting in his executive suite overlooking the harbor. "Then fix it permanently." He slid a folder across his desk containing financial projections, client complaint logs, and operational efficiency reports that read like disaster assessments. "We have maybe 6 weeks," he said. "Not months, weeks." I reviewed the documents. Legacy clients were filing formal complaints. Penalty clauses were being triggered by repeated failures. Systems were cobbled together by people who had long since left the company. "This is not just inefficient," I told him. "One major failure could trigger a cascade. You could lose your 3 largest accounts simultaneously." He leaned back, evaluating me the way someone evaluates a potential investment. "That is why you are here, Harvey. Fix it." "I am not a miracle worker," I replied. "I am a systems architect." "There is a significant difference." "You will have whatever resources you need," he said quickly. "Your title will be Chief Operations Officer, and you will report directly to me." I waited for a moment before asking about authority. "Complete operational control," he said, then added almost casually, "within reasonable boundaries." That phrase, reasonable boundaries, should have been a warning sign. I ignored it because I wanted the challenge more than I needed perfect conditions. At 54, I had seen companies make promises they never intended to keep. I had been burned before at my previous job, where I spent 5 years building a custom resource planning system from scratch, only to be let go the day after deployment so they could save on my salary. I swore I would never let that happen again. So when Peter agreed to hire me, I laid down a condition. I would not build this system as an employee of Apex. I would build it through my own company, Miller Tech, and license it to Apex Logistics Group. Peter hesitated, but he was too desperate to argue. We signed a contract that included a specific licensing agreement. Legal filed it away, and Peter forgot about it, assuming it was just boilerplate language, but I knew exactly what was in those pages. Appendix C, Section 3.7 of that contract stated that the license was non-transferable and tied directly to my operational oversight. If Apex materially altered my role or replaced me as the lead architect without mutual written agreement, Miller Tech reserved the right to transition the license to read-only mode for 30 days, after which access would be disabled. That was my safety net. As I walked out of that first meeting, I knew I had a mountain to climb, but at least I had a rope. Over the following weeks, I interviewed everyone whose name appeared in error reports. Developers who said, "No one has touched this code in 3 years and we are afraid to break it." Account managers who admitted, "Clients only stay because switching costs more than tolerating us." Finance staff who confessed, "These reports are incorrect every month, and we fix them manually before distribution." Compliance officers who warned, "We are one audit away from regulatory action." One executive pulled me aside and told me that people here protect their territory and that I should be careful how fast I moved. I moved anyway because the company was drowning and there was no time to play office politics. For the first month, I was not improving anything. I was simply preventing immediate collapse. In the second month, I started eliminating problems at their source, rewriting processes, removing duplicated logic, and automating checks that had previously depended on someone remembering to do them manually. It was grueling work. Late nights, early mornings, weekends that blurred into Monday without clear boundaries. I did not just repair bugs, I dismantled and reconstructed the entire foundation they had been standing on. Apex Logistics Group had 6 critical operational systems: client onboarding, inventory tracking, demand forecasting, compliance monitoring, vendor coordination, and executive reporting, all stitched together with custom scripts and fragile connections that failed constantly. These 6 systems were the lifeblood of Apex Logistics Group. When I first stepped into the office, they were running on outdated hardware and cobwebs, failing dozens of times a day. Every failure meant delayed shipments, furious clients, and thousands of dollars in penalties. The staff had become numb to the chaos, treating daily system crashes as an inevitable part of their jobs rather than a fixable problem. I started with the worst problem: demand forecasting. Every week, operations would generate predictions that were wrong by margins large enough to cost real money. Overstocked inventory, understocked essentials, and client commitments that could not be met. "This forecast is wrong again," Diana Fletcher from operations said one afternoon, standing behind my chair as the system processed. "If we order based on this, we will be short on 3 major accounts." "Give me 15 minutes, I said without turning around. "You said that yesterday," she snapped. "Yesterday was a different problem," I replied. "This is a different failure point." She stared, then sighed. "I do not know why you stay, honestly. Because if I leave now, you will all be unemployed in 2 months," I answered. One night around midnight, Walter Higgins, a developer, leaned over my shoulder. "No one has ever touched this layer before," he said. "The last architect said it was too complex." "That is why it keeps failing," I answered. "Everyone built on top of it, hoping the foundation would not crack. You are rewriting the entire thing?" "Yes. Are you sure that is wise?" "No," I said, "but it is necessary." Word spread fast. Clients stopped filing complaints about recurring issues. Support tickets that had appeared weekly vanished. Processing times decreased. Audit flags that had been constant background noise went quiet. Peter started visiting my area more frequently. He never asked how the systems worked. He asked what it meant for the company. "Clients seem calmer," he said one evening. "What changed?" "I made operations cheaper to run and harder to break," I answered. He nodded like he understood completely. "That is exactly the reason I hired you." The first major client to renew called me directly. "I do not know what you did, Harvey," he said, "but the errors stopped. I want you personally involved in every strategic discussion from now on." Our biggest client, a massive retail chain, had been on the verge of canceling their contract. The week after we deployed the new forecasting database, their director of operations called to express his amazement. He told us that the inventory reports were completely accurate. That renewal alone saved Apex from immediate liquidation. After that, the requests multiplied. In meetings, people stopped looking at the executive table when they had questions about operations. They looked at me. The financial trajectory changed next. Losses flattened, then reversed. Clients who had been threatening litigation renewed with improved terms. Referrals arrived from companies that had previously been one email away from terminating their contracts. Apex Logistics Group went from continuity risk and private conversations to turnaround success. Peter clapped me on the shoulder one morning. "You are making me look very smart," he said with that polished smile. "I am making the operations stable," I replied. He laughed. "Same thing, it was not. What I was doing was measurable and concrete. What he was doing was taking credit for the part that did not require waking up at 2:47 in the morning to fix a failed integration." As our record profit projections solidified, something shifted. Authority moved quietly. People in operations trusted my decisions more than executive memos. Managers consulted me before approving timelines that touched core systems. Every fix made the company stronger, but it also made me more dangerous to anyone whose influence depended on title rather than competence. That is when Jeffrey started appearing. He showed up at his first strategy meeting without introduction. Late 20s, expensive haircut, suit that fit too perfectly. He sat beside his father at the head of the table. "We need to think beyond operations," Jeffrey said. "This is about vision, not just systems maintenance." I glanced at the slide on the screen. It was my process map with my name removed. "Which part of the operational framework is that?" I asked. He hesitated, then recovered. "The overall strategy. We cannot get trapped in maintenance mode forever. That framework is what is keeping our largest client compliant right now," I said. "If you want changes, we need specifics." His eyes flicked to his father. Peter cleared his throat. "Harvey, let's not get too deep into details right now. We are discussing direction." That word, direction, started replacing concrete answers. In the following weeks, my calendar began changing. Meetings I used to lead were rescheduled without me. Decisions that affected core operations arrived in my inbox as information notices after they had been made. During one planning session, I pointed at the timeline. "This schedule ignores the testing window. You are deploying a critical change 2 days before a major client audit. We will adapt as we go," Jeffrey said, waving a hand. "We cannot move slowly. That is how outages happen," I replied. "Let's stay flexible," Peter cut in. After that meeting, I walked past the conference room as it emptied. I heard my name before I saw who was speaking. "She is very capable," Peter was saying. "And yeah, she is good," Jeffrey corrected quietly. "But she is operational. Investors do not care about process maps." "Exactly," Peter replied. "We need someone who can project confidence. Harvey has done her part. Now we need leadership." I stepped away. Later that day, Diana stopped by my desk. "You are not on the next executive review agenda," she said. "They removed your name." Jeffrey started presenting my work in meetings from which I had been excluded. He would stand in front of slides I had built and skip every detail that mattered. "Operational efficiency," he said once. "That is the key takeaway." Afterward, he passed by my desk. "You should be proud. None of this would exist without you." "It would not function without me either," I replied. He smiled. "That is not how leadership works." That was when I stopped expecting fairness and started paying closer attention to control. I went home that night not defeated, but awake. I did not sleep. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into systems that did not belong to Apex but to Miller Tech. I reviewed the contracts I had signed months earlier and kept in a secure location. The licensing server that validated Apex's access to the framework belonged to Miller Tech. The support accounts linked to the automation tasks that processed their data every night, reconciled it, and generated reports belonged to Miller Tech. The deployment keys used to roll out new releases and security patches belonged to Miller Tech. Every critical function of their operational infrastructure depended on 4 things: a license token that renewed every 30 days, a support contract flag that indicated active status, an operational oversight flag tied to lead architect Harvey Miller, and an automated compliance job that checked all 3 before allowing processing to continue. At 1:18 in the morning, I opened the control panel for Apex's instance. The status showed license active, renewal in 8 days, support active, contract term ending in 10 months, and operational oversight under Miller Tech lead architect Harvey Miller. Below that, configuration options were available to me as the system owner. I did not select terminate. This was not about destruction. It was about definition. At 1:23 in the morning, I clicked change oversight status. A prompt appeared. Apex has announced replacement of Miller Tech designated operational lead without prior mutual agreement. Do you wish to initiate read-only transition? I selected initiate read-only transition. Another prompt appeared. Transition window 24 to 72 hours. Select duration before read-only mode begins. I chose 24 hours, not because I wanted maximum chaos, but because I wanted clarity. If there was any part of them that understood what they had done, this would give them 1 day to acknowledge it. A final prompt appeared. Confirm. Apex's license will automatically move to read-only at 9 o'clock tomorrow in Apex's local time unless a remediation agreement is executed. I clicked confirm. I did not delete their data. I did not deploy a malicious patch. I did not change a single line of code inside their systems. I simply stopped telling my framework that it still had a reason to trust theirs. At 9 o'clock the next morning, the system transitioned. By 9:07, my phone buzzed. It was Peter Thornton's direct line, I answered. "Harvey," he said, breathless. We have a situation, I am aware, I said. The system is not responding, Peter barked. Operations are frozen, forecasts are not generating, clients are calling non-stop. What did you do? It is responding, I replied, just not the way you expect. What does that mean? He snapped. It means your license transitioned to read-only mode at 9 o'clock, I said, exactly as specified in Appendix C, Section 3.7 of our agreement. That clause was about sabotage, he barked, about if some external party tried to break in. That clause was about unilateral changes to my operational authority, I said. Yesterday, you publicly announced you were replacing me with your son without discussion, without amendment, without mutual agreement. That triggered the clause. You cannot just shut us down, he said. I did not shut anything down, I replied. The framework is still operational. Your data is intact. You can read everything. You just cannot write. No new forecasts, no new reconciliations, no updated reports, no overnight processing. In other words, nothing that lets you pretend you still control the engine. I heard a muffled voice in the background. Jeffrey says, the team is working on a workaround, Peter said. We will have it restored without you. Which team? I asked. Silence. The developers who actually understood the framework do not work for Apex, I said. They work for Miller Tech for me. And every one of their contracts is tied to the same support flag that just changed status. You did not think this through. You assumed I needed you more than you needed me. You were doing this out of spite. Jeffrey's voice cut in as he grabbed the phone. You were sabotaging the company because you were bitter. I am doing exactly what your father signed off on, I replied, because he assumed I would never enforce it. He assumed I would never actually use the protections we had established. We will replace you, Jeffrey said. We will rebuild what you did from scratch if necessary. You have been trying since 9 o'clock, I said. How is that going? He swore. What Jeffrey did not understand was that any attempt to bypass or rewrite my framework using their internal team would violate federal law. My legal counsel had spent the previous week reviewing the patents and copyrights registered under Miller Tech. He confirmed that the core algorithms we used to predict shipping bottlenecks were fully protected. Any unauthorized attempt by Apex to duplicate or reverse engineer these modules would constitute a willful violation, opening them up to statutory damages and immediate injunctions. Specifically, the patented automation routines and system architecture were protected under Title 35. United States Code, Section 271 for patent infringement, and the proprietary source code was protected under Title 17, United States Code, Section 106 for copyright infringement. My lawyers had already drafted the filings. If they tried to copy or reverse engineer even a single module, a federal injunction would shut down their entire server network by the end of the week. By noon, the first major client sent an email to my personal inbox, not to Apex. Harvey, our dashboards are locked. You have left Apex and we want to talk. We do not care whose name is on the building. We care who keeps our operations under control. Another message followed, then another. Different variations of the same message. If Harvey is not involved, we are not staying. Peter called again at 12:42. Harvey, he said, we need to meet. I am not on your payroll, I replied. We do not meet, we negotiate. This afternoon, boardroom B, 3 o'clock, he said. At 3 o'clock exactly. I walked into boardroom B. Peter was there, and Jeffrey was pacing by the window. 2 board members sat at the table, with Clara Shelby listening on speakerphone. I did not sit. I took the $100 bill from my wallet and placed it in the center of the table. What is that? Jeffrey demanded. Your father called it my actual worth, I said. Peter's face tightened. This is not productive, Harvey. It is perfectly productive, I replied, because this is what you thought you were buying. A man who would save your company and accept whatever crumbs you threw him. Cut the theatrics, Jeffrey spat. What do you want? I want control over my work, my company, and whether your systems run, I answered. Clara Shelby spoke through the speakerphone. Mr. Miller, you are making this sound like extortion. No, I replied. I am enforcing terms you already signed. The only secret here is how little attention anyone paid to their own documentation. Peter exhaled. What are our options? I sat down. Option 1, I said. Jeffrey remains in charge. You treat this like a temporary outage and hope clients stay patient. The framework remains in read-only mode, and in 30 days the license terminates automatically. You can rebuild from scratch. Rebuilding will take 20 months and cost millions. That is insane, Jeffrey snapped. We would hemorrhage clients. Option 2, I continued. You formally acknowledge that Apex's core operational framework remains licensed from Miller Tech. Operational oversight stays with me. You sign a new 5-year licensing agreement at market rate. Second, you issue a public correction. Jeffrey is not replacing me. If you want to give him a role, create a strategy position that does not touch operations. Third, you will never again tell anyone my value is $100. Any future change to my authority requires my written consent. Silence stretched. Jeffrey pointed at the bill. And if we refuse, then that 100 becomes a souvenir of the day you lost your company, I said. Clara Shelby spoke again. Peter, I suggest we sign, she said. Before the market discovers how much of our success depended on a man we tried to pay with pocket change. The boardroom was silent as Peter stared at the paper. I knew he was calculating the daily losses which were mounting by the hour. He looked at Clara Shelby, hoping for support. But her expression remained cold. She had already seen the renewal emails from our 3 largest clients, indicating they would terminate their relationship with Apex if my system remained offline. The leverage was absolute, and Peter knew it. They signed within the hour. Legal sent over a 5-year agreement with a strict non-interference clause. License fees were adjusted upward to reflect actual market rates. They issued a new announcement the next day. Effective immediately, Apex Logistics Group is entering into a long-term technology partnership with Miller Tech under the continued leadership of Chief Architect Harvey Miller. Jeffrey Thornton will transition to a strategic initiatives role focusing on non-operational projects. The operations team sent congratulations. Glad you are still here, Walter Higgins wrote. Thought we were done, Diana Fletcher added. I did not respond. This was never about appreciation. Months passed, the company stabilized, and clients became less nervous because the systems worked. Jeffrey lasted another quarter in his strategy role before quietly resigning. One afternoon, Peter came down to my floor. No cameras, no audience. You could have left and let it burn, he said. I did leave, I replied. You just did not realize what I had taken with me. And what was that, he asked. Your illusion, I said, that you were doing me a favor by keeping me around. He nodded slowly, looking smaller. I was wrong about your value, he said. I know, I answered. The difference now is that what you think does not determine it. Later that night, I took the $100 bill. I framed it and hung it above my desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that whatever number someone tries to assign you in a moment of arrogance is not your value. Your value is in the leverage you build quietly, in the systems no one else understands, and in the contracts you read when everyone else stops at the signature line. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Do not confuse silence with weakness. Do not mistake doing the real work for having no power. The person who keeps the operations running and the clients loyal is never just technical. Titles can be handed out, but respect cannot. And the next time someone smiles, hands you a small bill, and tells you that is your actual worth, smile, take it, and walk away. Then make sure that when they try to run the company without you the next morning, they discover exactly how expensive that cheap gesture was.